Hello, welcome to Film Trace. This is a podcast where we trace the life of a film from conception to production to release all the way to reception. What do we have today, Chris?
Well, it's my pick today. I think you were kind of the ringleader of the Pineapple Express pick. We are on an old movie week where we've been kind of alternating back and forth between looking at what's new on VOD versus what is new again on a available streaming service. So we were looking at the releases for Netflix in August, and one title in particular stood out to me. It's 2010's Alan Coulter directed, Academy Award nominated, Will Fetters written, Remember Me, starring Robert Pattinson, Emily DeRaven, and Chris Cooper, Pierce Brosnan. There's a lot of people in this, and it took a lot of people to make perhaps I'd go so far as to say one of the 5 worst movies of the decade.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is an appropriate tagline. Especially considering the cast involved. I mean, that is pretty stacked. You got Pattinson right after Twilight, before he makes his dive into art house. You have Pierce Brosnan, I think, at kind of the height of his game, right? I feel like back 2010, he was really, I mean, not like fame, but like acting. You know, like his like post James Bond, I think he's been a much better actor. I mean, that's just me. And Chris Cooper's always amazing. Yes. Emily DeRaven, she's still around, right? She's still semi-famous. She's in TV a lot.
Yeah, I mean, she's most famous for Lost, but I don't know. I think the most interesting thing is like those 3 names. They're either British or Australian, and it's supposedly a quintessential New York story. But yeah, it's let's talk about it, shall we? This was released back in March of 2010, and is available on Netflix this month. I believe it was on Netflix for a while, a few years ago. I remember seeing it on there, and I remember a particular meme circulating. That's when I saw it, because I could not believe my eyes what the meme was. I should say at this point, if you have not seen the film and you enjoy, bad movies, especially bad romance movies that think they have something very big to say, then I would definitely recommend checking this out. It's quite fun in my opinion. I think, Dan, you might think differently.
Yeah, it's an interesting ride. You don't expect what's going to happen at the end.
Yes.
And it's all about the ending. It's going to come up over and over again throughout the notes that we talk about how this was conceived, how it was produced, how it was received on release. The ending is just, it's very out of the blue. So if you have not seen the movie, don't listen to this podcast, or listen to this podcast, then go watch it. I don't care. It's your life. But the ending really changes the entire movie, I think, is the simplest way to put it. Exactly. In terms of the actual plot, let's walk through that. Tyler Robert Pattinson has a strained relationship with his father, Pierce Brosnan, since a family tragedy. Rebellious and troubled, he thinks no one can understand his pain. Then he meets Allie, Emily DeRaven. Her warmth and spirit soon begin to heal him, and they fall in love. Yay. But just when Tyler begins to rediscover happiness and meaning in his life, emerging secrets threaten their romance. I mean, that's a very dime store novel romance plot, isn't it? And it's also much more secretive and kind of mysterious than it actually is. The secret that come out, I mean, it's just, I don't know. There's a lot going on there. But before we get to that, let's talk about who made this thing.
Right. So it essentially came from the brain of Will Fetters, who was a 22-year-old screenwriter trying to make his break. And this script, he somehow got floated around Hollywood, and it caught the eye of director Alan Coulter. Where Fetters came up with this concept, I feel, is where we have to talk about the ending. So it's a generic romance, as Dan kind of outlined the plot. There's a lot of other things going on in it, but essentially it seems like Fetters had this concept of wanting to make a movie about a quote-unquote average person that died during the tragedy of 9/11. So it just hearing it come out of my own mouth makes it feel so absurd, more absurd than perhaps it even is No, it's pretty apt, I think.
But see, I don't know though. I kind of disagree. I would say that like the concept of what he started out with the ending. He started out with the main character dying in the Twin Towers attack on 9/11. That's the start of this and the end of this movie, essentially. The start of the story and the end of the movie. That to me kind of sounds semi-interesting. It kind of like, you know, the day in the life of someone who dies in that tragic event. That would be fascinating. What was the movie about the guy who was shot in Oakland and who was his last day of life?
Fruitvale Station. That's a really good parallel of an example of that concept being executed great.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so the concept in of itself, you know, from the start, I don't think it's necessarily the worst idea in the world, but the execution here is absolutely awful on every level. It is definitely one of the worst movies I've seen in a very long time. But where else did this movie come from? Like, how did he sort of come up with the idea?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of elements that it seemed went into this after the concept, right? He started reading about real people's lives that who were victims in 9/11, and ultimately he had his own, while he was going to law school, misunderstanding with Delaware law enforcement, and that's one of the key kind of entanglements of the characters, is that his character Tyler, as well as his friend Aiden, get involved in trying to like break up this random fight that happens in a crosswalk next to a bar that they're at. And the cop that comes in to arrest people for, I don't know what exactly, just like general violence on the streets. But he is a cop with a chip on his shoulder, played by Chris Cooper, trying to do everything he can to put some meaning into this role. And ultimately, that's where then Allie comes in, because Allie is the cop's daughter. And so this whole really convoluted,
it's terrible.
It's such a really bad premise, even taking away the 9/11 stuff, just for a romance of his friend suggesting to Tyler, played by Robert Pattinson, to try to hook up and then dump the daughter of this cop that messed up their lives that night. That's
disgusting. I mean, I thought that whole subplot was just awful. Like, why would you do that to a person?
No, and my favorite part of that is that we're supposed to generally think that Aiden, the friend, is an asshole, but not necessarily Tyler. Like, he's brooding and he's complicated, in quote marks.
Yeah.
But ultimately, when Aiden like comes up with this idea, he doesn't even have to do much convincing. Tyler's just like, fuck it, okay. And then he goes and tries to get involved with Allie, played by Emily DeRay.
Yeah, the start of this movie, there's two things that popped up immediately. One, in doing sort of this research, we found a couple of pieces of information. One is that Pattinson said that he was the one who got into a fight.
Right.
In Alphabet City, which I used to live in. And he apparently got into a fight with someone, exactly that situation. Someone hit someone's car with a baseball bat or something, whatever. It doesn't matter. So he says that, but then what the hell is Fedder's talking about? A misunderstanding with Delaware law enforcement. I want to know more about, like, what did you do to a cop that he then like took revenge on you? Like,
yeah, especially in Delaware. I don't know.
No sales tax though, so you know.
Yeah, it's either competing information or like Fedder's had some real, like, he was starting out like 22. He had a lot of weird ideas for this movie, and so maybe what he originally had in the script that was inspired by his own life wasn't good enough, because then it seemed like it was like the day after the thing happened to Pattinson, and then Pattinson's like, why don't we do this idea? And I am sure whenever Pattinson had an idea on the set of this movie, which we'll get into more later, but I mean, he's in the midst of his incredible rise to stardom, that it probably didn't take much for the producers and the director to be like, yeah, let's go with Rob's idea. Compared
He's
to
got
Fedder's.
Clout. He was in Twilight.
Exactly.
Well, what's fascinating, one of the more fascinating things about sort of looking into how this movie was made was the fact that they didn't know who Robert Pattinson was when they cast him.
I know. Right? This was like 2 years prior to the big explosion of fame.
And I was trying to think about, so what, Twilight came out, 2008? And like, it wasn't, I don't know. I remember like I invested a lot of money in Twilight on Howard Stock Exchange because my sister told me to, because she read the book and she's like, dude, this is going to be huge. You should invest in it. And it was like a dime stock and I made like so much money. I'm like super rich because of Twilight. I mean, fake money, of course. And so this was like what? So this got released 2 years later, but they must have filmed it. I think in 2009, it must have been. Right. And so right afterwards, but when they're casting it, right, the producer, what did the producer say? He looked at IMDb Pro. He typed in male stars 18 to 27 and Robert Pattinson came up as number 2. There's 2 things that come out of that. One, that IMDb, I forget, is used by actual people in the industry all the time to look for people. And the fact that he came up as number 2 is kind of shocking to me. There wasn't other people in 18 to 27, that age bracket that would be, perfect for this role.
Right.
But that's the producer, Nick Osborne. He said that in the LA Times, basically the interview he did. And so, I think it was kind of serendipitous that they came across him. They called Summit, and Summit's obviously the company who sort of put this out and put out Twilight. And they said they liked him a lot. They used him in Twilight and said, hey, we're going to go with him. And it turned out, I think, the casting of Pattinson, the movie's terrible. Let's just start out with that. I don't think there's any other way that we can sort of like, sort of view the film objectively. It's not a good movie, but no. Pattinson makes it kind of enjoyable. Yeah. Right? He brings his, I guess, chops and his just willingness to sort of go for it here and ham it up on some level as a younger actor. And I think that he was the best you could possibly do with this part. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it does. It's funny because like, I don't necessarily think he's doing his best. It definitely feels like, I mean, one of the things we read about is that, during the time of Twilight and all of a sudden then he's getting scripts thrown at him, he would go to In-N-Out Burger parking lot and read scripts in the back seat. Yeah. And I can just imagine like being like, I don't know, what is he, like 25 at this point or something?
Yeah, it's got to be something like that.
Yeah. And he's just like on the cusp of this insane stardom, and he's just like looking through these scripts, and he's probably, maybe he's high, I don't know, he's in the back seat in the parking lot, and he comes across this script with this incredibly awful twist ending, but could, potentially, I guess I could see a version of my 20-something-year-old self being like, oh, wow, this is different. And then you just like throw yourself into it. But he's not like really throwing himself into it where he's like committing fully. It's like, because the script is like, the dialogue is so hard to sell, but he knows that part of what makes him appealing as an actor is that he will do the weirdest things, right? Like that has followed him through with like Good Time and The Lighthouse. And so, yeah, it's just, you keep wanting to watch it because he makes like little strange movements and ticks and line deliveries.
Yeah, exactly. He brings something pretty special, I think, to the character and to the entire movie, and kind of, it gives it an almost sort of fun Bad Watch vibe to it. Yeah. Because he does, I don't know, it's something he's doing is pretty his own style and his own sort of way of creating this character on screen. I think that, like, before we move on to like how this thing was actually shot and stuff, I think there's one thing I wanted to call it. This the original title is actually called Memoirs, and I think that it's important to understand that like this movie is super personal to Fetters, and he says that kind of multiple times. And I'll draw a parallel to, I think, The Weatherman. I think that like sometimes when writers think about their lives and try to kind of barf what they felt in their own life on screen, we get stuff like this. Yep. Right. And I go back to what Aaron Sorkin says in his masterclass, which I've seen, of course, is that characters aren't real people. They're not real people. Characters exist only on the screen and only on the page, and they exist only to deliver the story. Now, you may not agree with that, but I think there's some truth into that. But when you try to make a character an extension of you, or like a real person that would exist off the page, it doesn't necessarily work, and it gets very messy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of what one of the major reasons why this film, I think, is a pretty substantial failure. What about shooting this thing? This had to be a nightmare, man.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like, so it's interesting that Alan Coulter is the guy that ends up directing this, right? Yeah. He up until that point had what did he make? Oh shoot, I had it up here and I
Hollywoodland?
Yes, Hollywoodland.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
the only thing he's
And that's
saying.
it.
He's a big TV guy. Big TV.
Yes, big TV guy, X-Files, Millennium, Sex and the City, and then even like some of the best episodes of The Sopranos. Like he's responsible for the college episode, which is arguably like in the top 3 most famous Sopranos episodes. So like but here's the thing is like this is a guy that clearly found his niche because then he went on to direct episodes of Boardwalk Empire, House of Cards, Vinyl, but we can forgive him for that. And then he ends up like seemingly having, I mean, this is what some directors do, right? They realize that they need somebody to boss them around, to tell them a house style. And without that in tow, it seems like he's letting his cinematographer, Jonathan Freeman, do a lot of the heavy lifting here, right? Like there is no really strong like mise-en-scène, sense of place or anything here. And so he is clearly in over his head. And I mean, there's so many other things going on from the production end. It's also produced by Trevor Engelson, who at the time was married to Meghan Markle, who has like a really small scene as a bartender.
Which I totally missed when I saw that. Totally
super random. But also that guy Engelson directed another one of the worst movies of the new millennium, All About Steve, in 2009. As well as License to Wed with John Krasinski and Robin Williams. Like this is just, you got a whole mess of people just like dipping their fingers in this thing. So the whole process, plus with the whole like Pattinson shooting to fame thing, it's just got to be a mess. And they even say that in one of the pieces from LA Times about like physically trying to do like a lot of on location shooting in New York, because so much of this movie is like shot out on the streets, right? Yeah. And so Pattinson's fame just like completely ruined their ability to really probably like mark off and do blocking and stuff like that. So a lot of it feels like claustrophobic and like way too many like medium shots, like the Chris Columbus effect, I like to call it. But it's just, I mean, could you feel that while you were watching that, where it just seemed like this, it seems like the old Simpsons joke, there were script problems from day one.
Yeah. I mean, it does not have a look or feel to it that I would say cinematic.
No,
it just doesn't feel that way. It almost feels like a TV show. Like it is very close up. And I think that like, knowing, so I lived when I lived in New York, you would see stuff shooting all of the time. Like it was just normally go to lunch, they're shooting a movie, it's like whatever. It's very hard. And I would be one of those assholes who I don't know who the person is who they're supposed to like not let somebody walk through the set. I don't know what that they're called, like a PA probably.
Yeah.
But I'd get so pissed because they're always filming and I would just walk right through it. Like, I don't give a shit. It's a freaking sidewalk. So if I'm like that, I can't even imagine what it would be like to have Robert Pattinson there and like 1,000 screaming fans. They said that he had to have 14 guards to go to the bathroom. Like, I mean, this is a total nightmare.
He changed hotels like 6 times. Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's already super hard to film in New York because of jerks like me. And now with all this sort of the fans and stuff, I don't know how they did it. And I think you can, like you said, you can really see the final results on the screen are just not there. And I think they had to rush through it. And they said it was a total relief when they got to the stage the last 2 weeks. I can't really figure out the timing of the shoot though, because I think it said that they shot it over like 19 days. I assume they're shooting Monday through Friday. So maybe like a month shoot. Yeah. So 2 weeks on location, then 2 weeks on the stage.
Yep.
I guess that's how it worked. The interior scenes are fine. I'm going to say, like, I mean, those are well shot.
They seem comfortable, and it's still weird, like so many like random little pieces that make you feel awkward, like them throwing spaghetti water at each other and stuff like that. But
yeah, what was that whole, and I will also say this, like his relationship, this is probably not to do with production, but I don't care. His relationship with his friend is just so bizarre.
It's so bizarre.
It's just bizarre who acts like that with their friend. Like,
and
in
he's
their
like
apartment,
it's his roommate, and like I don't know, he's auditing classes at NYU with him, and it's just
no one does that. Like, you don't have time to do that. You got to like work and stuff.
I know. He also he somehow
works
audits
at the
classes
Strand, which
and
is
also
a
works
great
at
bookstore.
Strand.
Yeah, great bookstore.
I thought we would come back, like we're there twice, right? But also it's still like those very like close mediums. Like the whole point of going to Strand to shoot is to see like the millions of books and high ceilings and everything. And it's just a waste.
And I would say this too. The only thing I would say about the production design is that his apartment, I lived in an old tenement
Yes.
building that was gross.
They actually got that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, this makes sense. It was a little bit affected. Like they almost like they put grime on the walls, like to pretend like someone had smoked there for 40 years. And I get that. And I think that they had a decent job with sort of, that sort of vibe, early 20s or whatever, living in New York City. Anything else about this production? Oh, funny story. When they shot on the beach, I thought this was hilarious. A member of the paparazzi spent hours kind of swimming around in the ocean with this camera above his head just to get a shot of when they're on the beach together, which I don't even remember that scene. Do you remember?
No.
Oh, I do remember the scene.
It's very brief. Yeah, but yeah.
That's just so pathetic. But it honestly, I think overall it sounded like a very tough. They started out with not a great concept.
Yeah.
The script was basically dog shit. Let's be honest. And was it on Blacklist though? Did I read that somewhere? Okay, maybe I was wrong. Maybe that was not true.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So terrible script. Basically an impossible shoot with a super famous guy. It's no wonder that the final product here is a little bit messy. What did people think about this when this thing got released on March 12th, 2010?
Rotten Tomatoes All Critics percentage of 27, which is oh man, and top critics 26. Like I so rarely see anything below 40, much less 30.
And this is sometimes you'll see stuff skewed because it's like 30 reviews, but this is like 100 reviews. Like this is not skewed at all. This is like a legitimate barometer of what critics thought, and anything below 50 is catastrophically bad.
Yeah. So that's that sums it up to say the least. But like Letterboxd, where the movie nerds are, and the Rotten Tomatoes audience, it's better. It's in the 60s, 69 for Rotten Tomato audience. Yeah. Also before validating, official ticket stubs or whatever. Letterboxd, I do think there's probably a good amount of inflation from so bad it's good ratings.
Letterboxd score surprises me because it's because like a 60 on Letterboxd is actually kind of pretty good, and 80 is like the high watermark of a masterpiece.
Yes.
And so I think that you're right. I think a lot of probably younger people, maybe not Zoomers, but younger millennials who love irony, love this film in that sense.
Yep. IMDb, where you get a lot more of the normies, 71 out of 100. I mean, I don't know. I'm curious to hear more what you thought about, like, the first couple acts. I mean, aside from just like the weird convoluted conflict behind the quote unquote secrets of their relationship, but just like as a did you think that they had chemistry? Were you invested in their relationship?
I was. But keep in mind, because one thing, I love romance films. So I'm a sucker for rom-coms and just general romance films. Just show me two people falling in love and I will be happy. I felt like there was something there. Like clearly the setup doesn't make any sense at all. That doesn't happen. And it would never happen to a character. So it's just dumb. But besides that, them falling in love, them sort of connecting, I thought it was pretty good. And I was somewhat invested. I wanted to know more about his brother and like his relationship with his brother and his father. Like to me, the meat of this story is Tyler, his brother Michael, and his father. That and like the whole cop thing in Alley. Like I don't really need it. And
there's like there's a precocious little sister in it too.
Oh, I totally forgot she was in
that. Well, that's what gives us the reveal is the precocious little sister. We see her at the school desk, and the teacher walks slowly across the classroom, and you see on the chalkboard September 11th, 2001.
Yikes.
But there's, I mean, the speaking of the brother and just like the family dynamics and everything, like there's so much like stuffed into this, but it like, I felt like I was watching an episode of The Wire where like it took me until like minute 40 or so to really understand what the family structure was. Like the brother,
because it makes no sense. It doesn't make, there's no, they throw you in the deep end and just expect you to know what's going on.
His parents are divorced. He has a stepdad, but he also calls his real dad by his first name. And so it's just
like that first scene where it's like his birthday or something.
Oh, I know.
I was like, who are all of you people?
Pierce Brosnan asks them to pass the salt, and apparently that's it. Or the sugar.
I love Pierce Brosnan. He needs to be in everything. Oh, he's great. How did this thing do? Okay, so it opened on March 12th, 2010. Did 8 million opening weekend, which is not great. It opened 5th behind Alice in Wonderland, Green Zone. She's Out of My League. Remember that movie? and Shutter Island.
Oof.
It dropped to 10th place in week 2, down 60%, which is terrible for a romance movie. You want to drop like 40% tops in your second week. 12th place in week 3. 12th place in week 3, down 40%. So I think the Robert Pattinson people showed up opening weekend and nobody else wanted to see this movie. It was shot for $16 million, which is not a ton, but was not a big budget movie studio back then. So it's kind of a lot of money for them. Total worldwide box office was 56. If I do math in my head, they probably took home about 25 million total in revenue from just the theaters and stuff. Probably marketed it for, 20 million. So they didn't make money until it went to home video, and then maybe they broke even. But I kind of don't think that maybe a little bit of profit, not much.
Yeah,
definitely kind of a pushed territory to loss, I would say.
Yeah. But still better than you'd think for such an awful movie.
Well, his fan base is so massive, and I think that also helped a lot of DVD sales.
Sure.
They just want to see him, and I don't know, they're just obsessed with him, so they want to see him on screen. But yeah, I think I think their expectation was that, it's Robert Pattinson. He's the Twilight guy. We're going to make like $100 million on this thing. And it just, that never happened because obviously the story's terrible.
And it's just confusing because I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a more recent example of a teen heartthrob, but you'd think they'd be more careful picking a script and a director. I mean, from the director of the dramatization of the George Reeves saga to the teen heartthrob story, it's like, I don't know what they're thinking.
I think, someone, I was on the screenwriting subreddit once, and someone told this story about how someone picked a book to sort of adapt for a screenplay. They picked a screenwriter. The screenwriter wrote the screenplay, and they went back and forth on it on drafts multiple times, like 5 or 6 times. And they finally kind of parted ways and said, hey, this isn't really what we want. We're bringing someone else in. This new guy comes in, reads the script, and then reads the book and realizes that the script has nothing to do with the book. So they'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to make an adaptation of a script that had nothing to do with the book they were adapting. Amazing. So that's the type of industry that this is. Yeah. Right. So my guess is that people read the script and you read 1,000 of them and this one stood out. It had that sort of edge. Oh, this is kind of crazy. And I think that's probably what it got through.
Only because of the last two pages of the script.
Yeah. Yeah. But he wrote the entire story around this. So it's as much as we want to say that it was tacked on, it wasn't tacked on. To him, this was the foundation of the entire
in that same interview where he's kind of decrying what all the critics are saying. He says I think we left enough breadcrumbs along the way, and that's just, as far as twist endings and mystery, that's the key thing. But there aren't none. There's
none. There's not a single one.
There's a thing where the roommate says when they're at Strand, you've been acting like a ghost these past couple weeks, and that's supposed to be a setup for he's actually dead or something. Wait,
was he dead? Did I miss the whole plot?
Well, I challenged our podcasting friends Mark and Bridget. They host the Screen Time podcast, and they watched it last night, and that was definitely their guess because they knew that if I was making them watch it, that there'd be some kind of payoff, and so they kept thinking that okay, Robert Pattinson's dead, and those are the breadcrumbs, but it's not there's a big difference between Ghost and dying in 9/11 upon his moment of redemption or whatever.
But there is there's no redemption. There's nothing. I don't. Whatever.
That's a it's a whole other thing.
Oh God. So are we crazy though? What do the critics think about this?
Oh yeah. So we had to do some real looking to find some positive quotes, didn't we? Robbie Collins, News of World now at the BBC. A teen pleasing low key indie romance with one of the most demented final twists ever.
I picked this one because I like Robbie Collins. He's a big BBC guy now. He fills in for Mark Kermode all the time. And he's just one of those guys who he will like something because it's crazy. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the only reason why I wrote a positive review. What did Ebert have to say about this thing?
Ebert, I mean, he sometimes, okay. So, and Fetter's actually alludes specifically to Ebert's language here in his comingsoon.net interview, where he's clearly struggling with depression. Ebert said, "The fact is, Remember Me is a well-made movie. I cared about the characters. I felt for them. Liberate them from the plot's destiny, which is an anvil around their necks, and you might have something." So that seemed to really hit in the worst way possible to Fetters. But he's fine now. He got nominated for adapting A Star is Born for the 5th time. I think he's found his place in the industry, but for better or worse. He also adapted a couple Sparks novels. Yeah.
I mean, how do you fix this movie? Can you fix it?
I really don't see how. I
think Ebert hints at it. I think if you went in, okay, you can't fix it after the script. Let's agree to that.
Yes.
The script would have to be gutted. But I think if you took the story of Tyler, Michael, and his father and made it really a kind of like tense, familial drama, I think it would work. I would see that. That seems arty. That seems interesting. That seems deep. Throw out 9/11, throw out the love interest. That's how I do it.
But I feel like even that movie's made 1,000 times. Like, just like getting over the suicide of a family member. Like, what else is there?
But I think the fatal flaw of this film is to think that that's not enough. Right?
True.
He always keeps adding more and more hot sauce to this thing. And you're going to have diarrhea at the end of the night. Like, it's going to be bad.
There's a DVD quote. I like that full quote. The negative reviews, are just as vicious as that. A.O. Scott from At the Movies, now at New York Times, obviously said, "If this movie is playing at a theater near you, you might want to consider moving somewhere else."
That's so brutal.
So it's a great pithy one-liner. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone says it's all weepy drool until the twist ending, which turns it shockingly offensive. And this is one of the sticking points, I think, for Fetters, is that's what hit him so poorly about how scathing the critics were, is that he was trying earnestly to like do a proper tribute to the victims of 9/11. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like backfired in the most oppositional way possible. Scott Tobias kind of adds on saying, when the film finally goes for broke with that ambitious, colossally misconceived finale, a tremendous emotional investment in these characters is necessary to pull it off. And even then, its prospects would be questionable. So I think he's hinting at kind of the opposite here, is that like, if you really wanted to make this a movie about, one of the victims of 9/11, you had to really have a lot of emotional investment. And I don't know if it's there, because Robert Pattinson's character is so like, he's just so like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, there's so little to him. Like, any kind of convictions he has, like his love for poetry, which is kind of randomly mentioned 3 or 4 times, and then
disappears.
Like, there's nothing. That's the thing about these characters. There's so much like baggage on them, and yet they don't really have personalities.
Yeah, I think that like, I think he also kind of hints that like, there's a tonal jar, like the tone's all over the place. Number one, like it starts out as like, it does kind of feel like a rom-com on some level almost,
especially with like the Adam Brody style roommate.
Yeah, but like, even within the first scenes, it's all over the place, because it starts out as like a revenge movie.
Oh, right.
And then it's a rom-com, and then it's a Fruitvale Station version of 9/11. Like, what did you just do? Like,
and that's probably important to mention, is that the beginning prologue, in which not Tyler's character, but Allie's character, her mother is murdered on the subway. That wasn't in the original script. So
why would you? I don't even understand why that's in the movie.
It's with an uncredited Martha Plimpton.
Oh, she's great. She's good. She's good in that scene, actually.
Yeah,
that was the best part of the movie.
I know.
Oh my God, what a mess!
So much death. So much.
What do we take away from this?
Oh my gosh,
from this
man.
This movie, Remember Me. What is it about it that sort of stands out to you as like,
we're gonna
a
do
success,
this.
a failure, or whatever?
Right. We're gonna do this, Dan. We're gonna start like giving a score at the end of each episode to wrap this up, between -100 and +100 of what we think the cultural impact either was, is, or will be of the film. I know you had a score in mind.
Mine's -90. I really think it does a disservice to. I think it does a disservice to the people who died in 9/11. Is that terrible to say?
No, I think that's totally.
It kind of feels like it's awful. It's like World Trade Center is a decent movie. Like that's not I think it sort of meets the requirement of what you need to do to make a movie about that tragedy.
United 93, I think, is even a better example.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, totally. But this is just disgusting on some level. And you know what? I honestly feel bad for Will Fetters because I shouldn't. But I think he felt like this was this super important person. He called the movie Memoirs. He called the script Memoirs. This is his life. And then he sort of decided to shove his life into a 9/11 tragedy story.
Right.
Dude, come on, man. No one's going to remember this movie. If they do go back and see it, they're going to be offended by it.
I know.
Can you imagine a Zoomer seeing this in like 10 years and being like, wait, this is what 9/11 was about?
Yeah, it was a bunch of attractive people that died.
It's like yappy, sort of vacuous.
Yeah. Meeting his father's lawyers at like 9 a.m. on a Tuesday.
Because he bailed him out. Wait, why did he bail him out again?
For this time it was
he attacked the school. He attacked a school. He threatened a child. He threatened a little 7-year-old girl. This movie, that's why I'm giving it a -90. It's one of the most offensive films I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's just tremendously awful. I think I have to agree with you. I don't have a reason.
You're not going to Price is Right me here with a negative 90, 91. Okay, no, -90. I like that. That we're in cahoots.
Agreement. But we might have a similar score next week. I don't know. What do we have next week for us, Dan?
Oh, we are doing the Tax Collector is what we're doing. The new Shia LaBeouf movie.
David Ayer.
Why do I know David Ayer? He did all these crazy movies. What did he do? He did Fury, Suicide Squad. End of Watch is good, but he also did Bright.
Yep. Oh. He is I don't know. He has very offensive sensibilities as well. So it'll be interesting. But he also did End of Watch, which is a decent movie.
I like End of Watch. I think that it's pretty good. We'll see. Is this like, I don't even know what the details. Is this like direct to DVD? What is going on with this movie?
It's a VOD movie, but I do think they put it, in a couple theaters.
Okay.
But yeah, it was number one on Apple TV and Fandango this past weekend. As well as number one on the box office, just like The Rental.
Oh, great. This will be fun to dive into.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Yeah. Thanks for listening. This has been Film Trace. We'll be back next weekend with The Tax Collector.